So what we're doing this year is we're going to kind of jump right into issues, and then at the end, give you a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the economy. So your economic plan, as outlined on your website, is basically all workers' rights initiatives. Do you have specific plans to draw in business or to expand the economy?
Right. Me too. So yes, it's it's a vast kind of array of many things because I will just say all the pieces are connected, right? When we talk about the economy, but when you talk about business in particular, if you want to start with that, it sounds like how would we encourage businesses here to New Hampshire, and how do we support our businesses that are here so that they can grow? A few things. I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and this is something I've been working on, as you know, for a long time, is that businesses are really looking for a prepared and educated workforce. That's what's most important to them. And I think that that's necessary for us to grow our economy so that businesses do well. But as you said, when we move into how does that work for families, how does that work for individuals, I think that the way that we provide for both families, young people, and for businesses to be able to grow the economy and the tools that they need is that we do need a prepared, educated, and a skilled workforce. And we do that by investing in education and job training. I think you have all heard me talk about this over many years. It hasn't changed. It is my priority to make sure that everyone here in New Hampshire, not just a few, have access and have access to training, job training, skilled training, and education. You know, I've always believed that investing in education is the wisest investment that we can make for the greatest return of everyone. So that's where I would start to begin how we would really move the economy to be able to do that. Businesses I've talked to, whether it's in advanced manufacturing, which is work I have been doing since I can't remember, even during the Senate, even before, were very interested because manufacturing started to grow in the state again. And what they were talking about is we don't have a prepared workforce because manufacturing had changed. So I was really fortunate in the Senate to be able to chair the Advanced Manufacturing Education Advisory Council, which brought CEOs from manufacturing to the same table as did leaders in education. So instead of moving forward with businesses, in particular manufacturing, moving forward on their own, thinking how do we solve this problem, and educators moving on their own, saying how do we prepare our students for the future, they were talking with each other. And many, I think, good initiatives came from that. We know one did right here at Keene State College, because we put together with the community college, Keene State, and the Chamber of Commerce to really move advanced manufacturing at the college, and it has continued to be there and to be very strong. So I think that model works for other industries as well, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is high tech, whether it's finance, whether it's healthcare. So if we invest in education and skilled training, businesses then get what they want, and they are profitable and move forward. And I think businesses from the outside start to see this state as unique because we have committed to a trained, educated workforce, and it's a priority in the state. So they would see us that way. A couple other things that we need to do is we need to expand broadband on every single corner of the state so that businesses who are here can communicate, businesses coming can as well. I think it is time for rail, in particular, to work with as well the infrastructure so that businesses also see us as very innovative and creative and moving forward. So a couple other issues in there is that, as you heard me say, businesses say, we have opportunities here. We have many opportunities here, but we don't have the workforce. And then we have young people who are saying, we're leaving New Hampshire because we don't see any opportunities. So I think what we need to do, and what I would do as governor, is to put forth public policy that really attracted our young people to the state. As I said, broadband, infrastructure with rail, but also affordable college, which includes the university system and the community college as well. And I think one of the ways to support young people to come to our university systems and the community college is to expand our state loan repayment program, so that we would be looking at that program and saying, what are the critical needs of this state to be able to move forward, have a stronger economy, and to make sure that everyone can be employed and our needs are met. Today, that repayment program is targeted healthcare. We need to expand that for healthcare. I think you are well aware that even in our own community and throughout the state, there is a lack of prepared workforce for the future in healthcare. But we could expand that to other public service like teaching. If we could do the same thing, we would really encourage young people to be here, to stay, to go to our universities, get degrees in teaching. And then they would know that we were committed to them, to stay here for so many years and to teach. And just think what would happen to education if we were encouraging our young people to come here, stay here, and teach in our K through 12 system, and to move forward then as well for everyone to have the opportunity to have an education. So those are just a couple thoughts. There are many, many more. I think what you might have seen on the website was my family economic security plan, and you might be referring to that as well. And yes, there are five pieces to that. One would be to increase the minimum wage gradually over 5 years up to $15. You know that today we don't have a minimum wage in our state, that we default to the federal, which is $7.25. There's no way that a family can take care of themselves with that low wage. So we do need to increase that. Just a quick story. I was campaigning, and one of the great things about being out and campaigning is just all the people you meet and the stories that they have to tell you. But I met a woman who had been a nurse in a nursing home. I don't know what kind of nurse or what level of training, but she had all of her life and she loved it. And a part of her, what was so strong, was that she wanted to take care of people. But then she got to a point in her life where she wasn't physically able to do that. And so she took a job at just a retail store to be able to make ends meet so she could retire. And she came up to me and just really looked at me and she says, is it possible, just possible, to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? I could make it. I could make it if you did that. That's all she was asking. She had worked all her entire life. She had given her entire life. And all she was asking is, could we just do that to make it work for her? And so I want to do that, make that work for her and for many others. So the others I mentioned was education, K through 12. We need to invest in education and to make sure that all of our children who attend school, K through 12, meet the standards that work for them, and to be able to have an education that fits who they are. Teaching to the child is something that we do in New Hampshire. We need to support that in our state to be able to do that. Also, to be able to have accountability with performance-based accountability as well, so that we know that not every child learns the same. So the way that they would provide for us their outcomes in education would be performance or testing, whatever works best. We all can get there. We're all going to get there, and we must get there, but we do it in different ways.
The governor is calling for a constitutional amendment to allow for more targeting of aid, in addition to keeping the courts out of the educational financing system. And we have a piece in today's paper from the BIA, head of the BIA, calling for the same thing, saying that targeting is necessary because of the Claremont decisions don't allow it. So what's your position on that?
Well, first of all, the state has a responsibility to fund education and to make sure that every child receives an education. That's the principle. That's what we have to do. And we need to keep the courts involved in our decisions and looking at how we fund it. I think I haven't read what you just said, but I did see what Governor Sununu had put out, and I think what his amendment was to move the courts make an amendment so they're not involved in the Constitution, and I would disagree with that.
So there is, of course, an argument that there's disparities in the way education funding is doled out by the state, and there's an argument that the Claremont decisions restrict that. Are you comfortable that there's arrows in the quiver for the governor and the legislature to address needs where it's most needed?
So one of the things when I was in the Senate, I was there for 10 years, so we went through looking at adequacy, and I was a part of putting that formula together. And so, as you know, every child received a certain base, but then there were additional criteria, 3 additional criteria, which was special needs, free and reduced lunch, and number of students in a classroom received additional funding. And I think that was the way that the court accepted the formula to say, yes, we have a responsibility that every child receives an education, but there are communities that do not have the industry to be able to receive the property taxes, and so it becomes unfair. And I think we do have a responsibility to equalize that. As I said, the principle is every student deserves and has a right to, and I call it a quality education, as the courts that use the term adequate education, to be able to have that. So yes, I do think that we have to go back and look at that formula, because what's happened over time is that it has been changed and amended, and we're getting back to where we started from. And I'm totally committed to make sure that the communities that don't have that property base end up having an equalization of funding so that their students can receive the same kind of education. And I think it's going back to the original formula and bringing that back up and looking at that today and what we need to do. But over time, it has been changed, and the amendment. So that's why it's sad that we're back where we were. That's why I have to be governor, because we need to get back there and to take care of those things. And that is one of the reasons, probably the biggest reason I'm running for governor, is because after the 2016 election, I saw that the direction of the state was going in the wrong direction. I was deeply, deeply concerned, and saw so many of the policies that were being implemented in DC under the current federal administration they were making their way here to New Hampshire, and education is one. You know that the governor has tried to push through the school voucher program. Says if he is reelected, it will be his signature piece of legislation, and he stands with Betsy DeVos to make sure that that will happen, and it's the same formula, the same principle as it's happening nationally. That school voucher program would weaken public education, and it would raise our property taxes. As governor, I want to strengthen public education. That's the prime thing that we need to do. So I would veto any voucher program that took money from public schools to private or religious schools. So we go back to Claremont, but here we are really looking at an administration that is trying to weaken public schools across the board. What I did want to say, just finished on that, the other was the K through 12, but just there are 44,000 children who in our state are food insecure, that don't know on a daily basis where they're getting their food next. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me, and I feel like it's unacceptable to our state. So we must make sure that every child sitting in their seat in school in the morning comes to school not hungry. That's the first thing I would do. We can put all the money we want into education. We can have all the formulas that we want. But if we have a child who's sitting in the classroom and they're hungry, they are not going to learn. Things are difficult sometimes to put solutions together. That's a problem we can solve. And we know it exists because I think you've written and talked about it as well here, about all the programs that are going on to make sure that on a Friday afternoon there's food for children to take home. So we have to change that. As I mentioned, we have to create opportunities so that There's affordable college, affordable community college as well. I have a couple ideas that we can do in that. And we need to pass the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. That provides economic security for many of the people here in New Hampshire. Again, the governor talked about doing that, but wasn't able to get that through the legislation. Get that through and to sign that into law. I would get it through and sign it into law. Really, people in our community and in our state, if there's someone in their family who needs them and cares because they're sick, or there's been a tragedy in your family, we have a right to be with them, and we need to. Otherwise, who are we? What kind of values are we have in the state? So I think you know that I've been in the Senate for 10 years, and that I know how to solve problems by bringing the right people to the table. And I also know how to take ideas and put them into action, and I have a record of doing that. So that's just a long answer to your
That was a wide-ranging answer.
Could you talk a little bit more about, if you were governor, what some of the specific plans you'd have for making college more affordable and reducing this student debt that we're 50th in the nation for?
Well, we're 50th in the nation for funding. So that would be the first thing that we have to do, is to look towards, we have to put more funding into college, both the community college and to the university system. I had put a bill in when I was in the Senate of over $10 million to put in. It made a real difference in tuition. If you calculate that out, didn't get through. But as governor, I have a much stronger voice to be able to put that kind of legislation through, to really partner with our university system in the community college. The first thing we have to do is we have to say it's a priority and it's important, and that we need to do it for the economy. That's the first thing that we have to do. And as governor, you can put at the top of your budget the line that is most important to you, and it will be education, K through 12 and college, and the university system and the community college as well. The other things I mentioned was the repayment loan program, to expand that. And you know, as we said at the very beginning when we were talking about how businesses are looking for an educated and prepared workforce, they're ready to work together. And I think that those are the opportunities that we have to make possible. And that's what I'm good at doing, is bringing people together to be able to do that. If businesses are looking for an educated workforce, they need to invest in that. If educators are looking for support from businesses, they need to invest in businesses as well. So paid internships, apprenticeships, I think will keep our students here early on, and they'll be involved in our community and in jobs. They will stay, and it will grow our economy. So I think it's a combination of increased funding, repayment loan programs, investing with businesses and industries in our state to invest with each other, and to provide paid internships and apprenticeships, so the cost of education is less.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but one of the biggest priority issues in the state over the past decade almost now has been the opioid crisis. And throughout it, the demand seems to be the issue, is reducing demand, and a big part of that is getting people into treatment and recovery. But companies, there aren't enough options for treatment and recovery in New Hampshire, and it seems to be because companies say they can't, it's not profitable for them. What would you as governor do to change that?
Well, the first thing I would do is, and again, this is a cultural change, but we must treat the opioid epidemic as a public health epidemic, and it's an illness. If there was any other medical epidemic in our state, we would not be talking about, should we, can we, how do we do this? We would do it. So we have to have a comprehensive plan for prevention, treatment, and recovery throughout the state, and bring everyone to the table, whether it's medical, whether it's recovery coaches, whether it's families, but we have to bring them all together to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan. It is an epidemic. There's no question about it. So I know that we do need many more recovery coaches. So I think that we would have to fund more training and for people to be recovery coaches and to be able to fund those programs. I know that when I was in the Senate, I was the one senator that did get through to Southwest Community Services $250,000 to start the first point of contact for those who wanted help. I don't know if you remember this at the time, and I think we need to be doing more of that, the state funding it. So what this program did, we worked with the sheriffs, with first responders, and the agency, Southwest Community Services, so that if someone had an overdose, brought back, raised their hand in 1 second and said, "I need help," there was a phone number for everyone to call to be able to put that person in place to treatment. Then we go to the next, and we need more treatment facilities as well. We just have to be committed to do it. We have to be committed to do it. I think we're still into a thinking of, is it really important? You know, I was in Manchester campaigning, and I went to the fire station there, and we were just talking to all the firemen about what they were doing, and they said, you know, you think you know what we do, but this is not what we're doing right now. And as we were there, one of the alarms went off, and he said, it's an overdose, and we're going to go. And he said, why don't you come with me? So I went. I got on the fire truck, and I went with him. And I saw what they did, and I saw that they brought someone back to life. We need to support them. We need to support those people. And on the way back, I said to him, to the fire chief, so what was that like for you to do that? He said, Molly, this is my 5th time today. It's an epidemic. It's affecting everyone's families. I don't think there's anyone untouched by it, and that's how we have to treat it. So we treat it as the same way we would any epidemic. We make it a priority. We bring people to the table who know how to solve these problems, and we fund it. Thank goodness for our federal delegation to be able to bring, $23 million to the state. And we need to disperse that through the state in a way that's comprehensive to all the communities to address the issue, and to work with the federal government and the state to address the epidemic. It's that important.
So recovery coaches are a point of contact, and as I've talked with people about the CAP program and Chari, they have said, okay, so we're there and we do that, and then we're going to recommend they get into a program.
Right.
So at that point, then they need beds, or they need some kind of sustained help.
Right.
And that seems to be where companies are saying, well, we don't see enough profit there. If they're doing Medicaid, the
you're talking
reimbursement
about a
rates are
company
too
that
low.
would actually build the treatment center.
Yes.
Right.
So what at that point, what does the governor do to make sure that those resources are available, and that companies have that incentive to be providing that?
Right. Well, I hope I've been clear that we would treat it as we would any epidemic, and if that's what we needed were beds for treatment, we would make it happen. There are hospitals that have empty floors that I believe we could move into more beds as well. But it isn't even about profit. It isn't about companies coming in and building treatment centers. It's looking at what do we have available to us today? How do we move that forward? How do we take care of it today? And also then, I think one of the things about the opiate epidemic, what the real necessity is, prevention and treatment, but also the recovery coaches. And that's where I mentioned that I would fund programs to teach and to empower recovery coaches to be able to work and have the funding to be able to do that. That would be a priority. And I am disappointed that our governor is really not putting forth any funding into this opiate epidemic, and kind of, I see it as ignoring it. I mean, he has been down to Washington how many times and hasn't been able to really bring any funding into our state, where our federal delegation has been able to do that. So I think we have to work together to make sure that funding is available.
Jumping over to health insurance, we have an exchange here in New Hampshire, but what would you do as governor specifically to try to increase competition here and try to lower costs for people?
Well, to begin with, everyone has a right to health care. I do feel that I would support universal health care. It is, again, I think it's very difficult on a state level, but I would work regionally to move forward in that direction. I think that we need to enhance the Affordable Care Act, which has really truly been diminished over time, concerned about the pre-existing conditions and what's happening with that, and also to Medicaid expansion. I supported Medicaid expansion. I think we need to make it permanent. So when we talk about competition, we're talking about managed care, I think is what you're looking at. And we can always take a look at other companies or other insurance companies to work with the managed care. But when I see the managed care, the two managed care companies that we're dealing with today, it's working. It's working. The most important thing that we do, I think, is to make sure that everyone has access to health care. And that is through the Affordable Care Act, strengthen that, and to continue to fund Medicaid expansion.
To go to energy, just about a month
Yes.
ago, we were over at the hydropower station in
Right.
Marlborough. So that's certainly been a priority for you, but you've also said that you wouldn't support any project that didn't have local support. So how do you square those two interests, looking at something like the Antrim wind farm, which did have some local opposition?
Yes, you were with us when we did our tour throughout the state. So let's talk about where we are in the environment here in the state and what we can do, and about energy as well. We all know climate change is real, and I think that we should base any public policy that we have about energy and how we move forward based on fact and science. I know our current governor has said that he doesn't believe that climate change is real. I think that's a problem. And I think it shows up in many of the things that he has been either implementing or vetoing. So I had put forth the first group net metering bill in the state and worked with the community here, brought experts to the table, and we put that forth. It was bipartisan. It wasn't easy, but we did get it through the Senate. It provided 1 megawatt, but it did propel hydro and solar in our state. And then in the last 2 years, the legislators put forth a piece of legislation to expand that megawatt so we could move forward with hydro and with solar. And the governor vetoed it. So I think that is very disappointing. And we have been on a tour, as you know, through the state to really see what was happening. And I think it affects communities like Keene, who I know want to be fully renewable energy by 2050. And we were in other towns and in our state who were relying on that expansion. So what it would be able to do is to group net meter energy to provide energy in our state and in their own communities. That would have job growth, reduce the cost of energy, which would then reduce the cost of our property tax. And instead, we have a governor who said no, and we find out not too long after that he had received $50,000 from Eversource. I am the only candidate running for governor who has never received any corporate contributions. So we need to wean ourselves from fossil fuel, and we need to expand solar and hydro, wind, and other renewables. I think I would have a goal of looking at, we were able to produce in this state renewable energy so that we would require our utilities to actually purchase renewable energy from within our state and not all from outside of the state, and to expand renewable energy. It's the way that we need to go.
But second part of that, I'm curious, would you support something that didn't have local support, say a wind farm or a solar array or a hydropower station?
I think the bottom line for me about supporting projects in the state is that I would look at, did it lower our carbon footprint, and does it provide safety in our communities? Those would be my two biggest criteria. And I think that obviously working with communities and communicating about those two issues and how it affects their community would be an important job of a governor, and I would do that as well, because I like to work collaboratively, bring communities together and solve problems.
Just on the net metering issue, I just want to clarify. So would you support the cap being raised to the extent that legislation the governor vetoed, or just getting rid of the cap entirely?
Yeah. I'm disappointed that he vetoed that bill. I would have signed that into law. But yes, I would support getting rid of the cap altogether.
And then, so what effect, when people say, okay, so then you're putting it on the backs of ratepayers?
Yeah. There's
how
no
do you-
support for that. There's really no support for that. And many of the reports that came out, the PUC, even a report by the Republican Party in the state came out and said, we are not subsidizing that. And there is really very little fact to base that, that the ratepayers, that those prices would go up. In fact, what we see is that energy costs are less and that there's job growth. So it also strengthens the economy.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit again. Since the Supreme Court's ruling this past term regarding legalized sports betting, a number of states have moved toward implementing ways to make that legal in their states, including several near New Hampshire. Should New Hampshire do that? And if so, what would that look like?
You know, I think this is an issue that people are talking a lot about. I actually think I saw something in the paper last night. Did I see something in the paper last night about this issue, of what's going on in Massachusetts and what has happened there? You know, sports betting is real, and it's here. And so I think that if we would decide to legalize sports betting, I would tax it and certainly allow some funding within that program to treat those who have any kind of addiction issues with gambling.
Do you see that as would be a method for, I know Lou D'Alessandro has said, I'm going to put forth legislation and it's going to be tied to a casino, which he's long advocated for. Would you see it as something that would help introduce casino?
No, I don't.
Gambling?
And I would not support it if it did.
So on the topic of funding the state through sin taxes, you advocate legalizing marijuana use, and presumably as in part at least a revenue source. Colorado did that 5 years ago, and Washington, and in Colorado, obviously they're kind of the guinea pig for this, but traffic accidents are up, and illegal sales of marijuana have not dropped. A lot of the science is still out on what marijuana does to developing brains, and secondhand smoke effects. Why would you advocate New Hampshire do that now? What's the compelling argument there?
So there's a couple of things. You're absolutely right that I do support legalizing marijuana, regulating it and taxing it, and I think it's in the regulating that are some of the issues that you're talking about. You know, I've been through the process of legislation and how we move legislation forward, and part of that legislation would be clear elements of how we regulate marijuana. We do regulate alcohol, and we put stipulations that you have to be a certain age. You can only use alcohol in certain places. You certainly can't drive. So we would have regulations that fit for marijuana in this very same way. So I think some of the examples that you're talking about, we would want to regulate in any kind of bill that we passed into law that was very clear about the boundaries that needed to be there to legalize it. So it's legalize, regulate, and then tax as well.
And again, as a revenue source, do you have an idea of what that might contribute to the state?
I don't. I haven't done any calculations on that. We certainly would be working through that in the process. We have all the states that are around us in this region that are working on the same issue, and other governors as well, and I would look to them to see what the work that they're doing and to calculate that. But I think that that it would be important to tax the legalization of marijuana.
To move from marijuana to guns,
Mm-hmm.
you have laid out some proposals on your website that are quite a dramatic change from the current state of gun laws in New Hampshire, from reinstating concealed carry permits to red flag law. How do you expect to move a legislature that's voted overwhelmingly for eliminating the permits for concealed carry, among other things?
Right. Thank you for that question, because it's important to me as we do move forward to address the issue. Look, we have young people today who are so courageous and standing up, and they're looking for us to be with them and to stand with them. I think that times have changed. We've had tragedies that are unacceptable. People are moving in a different direction. What I have always proposed is common sense, gun safety, and actually stood up to common sense gun safety when I was in the Senate. And as governor, we would put through legislation and work it. I know how to work across party lines. I've been doing that for a long time to make sure that we will be able to pass legislation. I would just tell you that I have 4 children, and they're grown. And when they went to school every day, I never worried that they would be affected by gun violence. But I now have 7 grandchildren, and I worry about them every day. So as governor, I'm not going to wait till there's a tragedy in our state. It is time to pass universal background checks, and we can do that and work regionally as well. I believe that the people of New Hampshire, everywhere I go, they're ready for that. Common sense, we need to keep guns out of the hands of children. And we need to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. And I also do believe that we need to keep military-style weapons off the streets of New Hampshire. And yes, I would work to repeal the concealed, I would work so that you do have to have a permit to carry a concealed weapon. And I think New Hampshire's ready for it. Yes, there will always be some who won't agree with us, but it's common sense. It's about our children. And I think people get it. They get it. Our children need to be able to go to school and feel safe and not think about that. Parents need to be able to drop their children off and not be worried about gun violence in their schools. So I'm committed to these issues, this issue on gun safety, and we have to do it. So I'll find a way. I have found a way to put legislation through when no one thought we could do it before. And you have to work together, bring people together, and that's what governors do. And you have to be there with the legislature as you're going through the process and voting on this. You have to be present in our state to be able to do that as well, and I will.
Could you elaborate a bit on the red flag proposal then?
Yeah, I am not as familiar with the red flag as I am with the proposal that I put out, because my plan has really, I would support it, but I know more clearly about, what I understand about the red flag is that if you see someone and you're concerned about them, that we have a responsibility to be able to communicate that. And I think it goes into mental illness as well in our state. But as you can hear, I'm not as familiar with that one. What I know, I support, but I would prefer to be looking at the proposals that I have put out. Those are my plans.
So you've mentioned, Molly, a number of times having an ability to bring people together or to get people working together. Really, but there's a good chance that you could become governor and have a legislature that is from the opposing party or majorities. So how exactly do you do that? You mentioned one just a moment ago, having gotten legislation through that nobody thought you could get through. What would that be?
There were a couple. One was the group net metering bill. We worked very hard. People did not think that that could work, and we were able to pull people in across the aisle in the House and the Senate to be able to do that. And I had many people tell me it's impossible. That is not going to happen. B corporations that you're probably familiar with, people were very wary with that, and we worked across party lines, bringing people into hearings like our students who are really human capital, telling the senators and the House how important it was to them to be able to work here, to work for meaningful companies that had a dual purpose, fiduciary duty to profit and also to the environment and to make a difference in their communities. So it's hearings, it's bringing people, it's gathering experts around the table, it's being present and talking and listening to each other about what's important to get that through, to get legislation through. Just as we talk about education and how important that is to me, it is the core. Public education is the core of democracy. And if, as I think I mentioned, if we erode that, we erode democracy. We have to bring people to the table who understand that priority and make sure it's at the top of our budget and to work together to get there. That's what I do. That's what I've done my entire life. I know how to do that. And my record, I think, stands on its own to show you that that you can see that that's possible. All of the work that I've done to get legislation passed, whether it was in education, whether it was renewable energy, whether it's healthcare. I stood up in the Senate, my record, which I'm very proud of, always stood up for public education. I've been a champion every day for women's rights, women's reproductive rights. And I have stood with Planned Parenthood every day and made sure that they receive the contracting and the funding that they've needed. I stood up for common sense gun safety when people weren't even talking about it. They weren't even talking about it. So, Marriage Equality Act, I was one of the first senators to sign on and to bring people together to make sure that we knew what was important. What are the values? What's important to the state? How do we move the economy? Those are the kind of discussions that we've had. I've worked with the VFA. I've worked with conservative groups. I've worked with strong leaders, Democrats as well, and the people in our community to come and to speak. And I get things done. It's not just talking about ideas and what we can do, but putting those ideas into action. It is who I am, and I have been doing this all of my life. I always go back to kind of kidding, but having been number 2 in a large family and the oldest girl, we got things done then, and I learned early on. And every time in my life, whatever I've done, it has been to move forward and to make sure that the work continues, and not just talking about it, but doing it. That's what I like to do, is to make it happen. Think about the courthouse here. Do people tell us how many years, and you remember well, that it was impossible to build a new courthouse? We had a courthouse in City Hall that was not safe. People didn't have any privacy. And people said, there's no way, Molly, during a recession you're going to be able to build a new courthouse. I did it. We did it. Brought together to the table, the city, the county, state offices, and Monadnock Economic Development. And every time we'd start to see maybe it wasn't going to work, I'd pull it back, bring people back to the table. New proposals. How can we do this? How can we make it work? And what's there today? We have a new courthouse. And the bottom line with that courthouse is people have access to justice. And that's the principle that we start with, that I started with. And now look, we have it. It's safe, there's privacy, access, we have justice and access to justice in our community. That's how I work. And I get things done. And I have a record to show you that. It's easy to talk about plans and easy to have ideas. and they're important, and a vision is important. But we've got to put action on the table and bring people together, and it has to be sustainable over time. That's what good law is, and that's what I do, and that's what I want to do as governor. I've been tested. You know, a governor sits in a hot seat. A governor has to make really difficult decisions for the people that she serves. She has to know who she is, what her core values are, and she has to know that those core values are who she is for her entire life. I have been tested, and I am ready to be that effective leader. And I will tell you that my record, I believe, speaks for itself. I have a progressive record. I have been fighting for these issues all of my life. I'm energized to do it. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about the direction our state is going. It's unacceptable, and it's going in the wrong direction. When we talk about our young people and trying to make sure that they want to stay here, yes, we'll make college affordable. Yes, we'll work on the debt. And we will do those things because we're committed to do it. And I know how to get them done. But we also have to make sure that real basic principles and values are important in the state and that we adhere to those. And I would veto any voter suppression bill that ever came to my desk. I find it unacceptable that we are even having this conversation in the state. Those are values and principles that we need to start with. Yes, everyone deserves and has the right to health care. And we will look at how we can make that even better with the pieces that we have. We have to move forward with renewable energy. I've been a leader doing that in this state and will continue to be. We need clean air and clean water. That's what's important to this state. I know New Hampshire. This is where I've lived and I've raised a family. And New Hampshire has been good to me. Has been very good to me. You know, I went back to college as a single mom here at Keene State. And I believed at the time, no matter how hard it was, I delivered newspapers right from here on Saturday mornings. Because I believed.
So it's always the start of a great career.
It is. I remember you for that. But I believe that without that education, I would not be able to move forward in my life, to provide opportunities for my children and to be able to care for them, both financially and as the mother I wanted to be, without education. I want that for everybody.
You described a lot of initiatives that at some point or another are going to need some funding. And so as you look at the state's sources of revenues, are you satisfied at the level that they're at? And if not, where would you be looking to augment them? You've mentioned marijuana, but uncertain how much that might generate. So why don't you just address that?
A couple things. One, we talk about priorities and how a governor puts a budget together. So you have the opportunity to start there with what's most important. And you've heard today, I think, what's most important to me. The other thing to remember is that our current governor has given $100 million in tax breaks to the 3% of the wealthiest corporations. We need to take that $100 million and invest it in education and job training and making college affordable. It's unacceptable. I would repeal those tax breaks. We have choices to make when you're a governor. You have choices to make. So if the economy is doing well enough to give tax breaks, then I think we have a choice to make. Do we give tax breaks, or do we provide education and training so that people can take care of themselves, each other, and their families, and businesses do better? Because that's what they're looking for, and we grow. Not just an economy that works for a few, but an economy that works for everyone. We need an innovative, creative, and a sustainable economy. And we do that by that investment. We make a choice. Our young people stay.
And do you see a need for any other alternative revenue sources? Sales tax, other kinds of taxes, or are there cuts elsewhere? I mean, you talked about taking back the $100 million from the
and that's the start.
Yeah.
And that's the start. And
but does that do it for you in your plans, or are you thinking you're going to need to find other sources elsewhere?
I've always been clear since the beginning of this campaign as governor that I do not support a sales or income tax, and nobody nobody running for governor in this election supports the sales or income tax. So, of course, I will always look for revenue where we can do better. But the way that I really feel strongly about a plan is how we invest, repeal the taxes, invest that into education training. The economy, young people stay because they believe that we are invested in them, and we provide many of the tools that they need. They stay. Businesses have what they need because now they've got a prepared and educated workforce, and they do well. And when they do well, our general revenues increase, and we continue to invest so that everyone has an opportunity to succeed in the state and not just a few. And that's what's exciting to me. That's what really energizes me, is that possibility, to really see that people look to New Hampshire as a place where they are safe, it's beautiful, where they can be who they are, and they will be involved in growing an economy. Businesses look to this state, say innovation, creativity, you're invested in a workforce, and that's how we will have a strong economy. And everybody wins, and everybody wins. It's about everybody and not just a few. And that's why I am not taking any funding from corporations.
What are some of the other things that you would defund or cut to kind of shift the priorities over to some of the things that you talked about?
You know, I think that we always look at where we can do better. But if you have a goal of where you want to go, like let's just say, for example, if we are investing in renewable energy and we are weaning ourselves from fossil fuels, and communities like Keene and other communities are able to produce renewable energy, then those energy costs are less. If those energy costs are less because the schools are involved in that, the school buildings and the town buildings, then your property taxes are less as well. And that we have more revenue in our state. So I don't think it's always when we talk about do we cut, but more of how are we smart? How can we be smart so that we do increase job growth and lower cost? You know, businesses, if they could decrease their energy costs, they'd be happy. They would be very happy. And you know how we do that? Renewable energy. And we have better clean air, clean water, and we all win. We can do that. Those are the things that we can do in this state. So when you talk about how do we make it work specifically in that revenue, those are the kind of things that I would look at. What is the smart and wise way to move forward with this so that we lower all kinds of costs? Even in our schools, we need to be listening to our teachers. We need to ask them, what are the things that we can do in school that are working and support you? And what are the things that are not working? And let's get rid of them. Let's move ahead and be innovative and creative and work together. I love the idea that Keene State College is looking at collaborating with the community college. Think about that. That's not cutting funds from the community college or Keene State. That's working together as in a collaboration so that everybody wins in that situation and we lower cost. And students then have options, not just students, young students, but students who want to be, people who want to be retrained and want those same opportunities. I'll just say, the other day I was at a gas station and there was a gentleman who was actually working there. And I said something to him. He knew who I was. He asked me about it, and he was saying, like, you know, I don't mind this job. I just don't get paid enough. And I said, well, what would you like to do? And he said, there are so many things I'd like to do. If somebody would just teach me, I can learn. So think about a state that we have and a governor who says, we're going to do that for you. We want you to be who you are and to grow and to be able to have those opportunities for you, because we all win when we do that. We all win. And those are the kinds of things that are important to me. Our community education needs our support. The students there are the people we're looking for to work as well. Every person has a place. And we need to make sure that we're looking, everyone has an opportunity to move forward. Everybody. And we start by our prioritizing. That's education, job training, collaborating, working together, renewable energy. You know, there are people in healthcare that tell me that they are staying with a job. They would really like to start a new company, but they can't because of healthcare. they would lose their health care. Universal health care think what that would open up to our economy and to young people, knowing that how committed we are to them to be who they are and not to feel stuck in a job that they don't want. We can do those things. That's what I want to do.
When you talk about the governor having to make priorities in budgeting, you're looking to put more money into healthcare. You're looking to put more money into education, into point of contact services for opioids, but you don't see a need to offset that with cuts anywhere.
I hope I've been clear that those are priorities, and that yes, we would start with the repeal of those tax breaks, and that's important. But also being very smart and wise about what's working. When we talked about the opiate epidemic, yes, we need to fund recovery coaches, as I had said. It's not. It will come back. That money, all of that funding is an investment to come back to the community and to work with businesses to do that. So we often think about the economy as where's the revenue coming in specifically, and then where do we make the cuts? I like to see us do this in a broader sense, and I hope that you're hearing me in this, in that we will have to be wise about the way that we do it. So we work with businesses and say to them, it would be helpful and necessary to invest in recovery coaches as well, because it will help your business as well. So I'm not looking when I walk into the governor's seat to say, oh, I'm going to cut this and get rid of this. I'm going to see what our priorities are, what's most important, what's critical, and I think I would start with education because it's the smartest investment. And the way that I see it is more revenue will be coming back into the state. Businesses will do well. Young people will stay. They'll invest, and our economy grows. We have to start somewhere, and it's investing in education, and it's repealing those tax breaks. And it will come around full circle. That's how things work.
You mentioned a couple of times wanting to move in the direction of universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? Is that a single payer system?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Similar? It is when you hear about. It is a single payer. However, we can make that work. That everyone has access to health care. We talk about Medicaid or Medicare, universal Medicare as well, and a system similar to that. Obviously it's much more based on what the federal government can do and how we get what works best for our country here, how we would do that. But I would support it because the bottom line, what I support is the bottom line that everyone has a right to health care, and I think it's the smartest way, and I think economically the smartest way to do that as well. So I work with the federal delegation over time, whatever it takes to make that happen. We need to elect Democrats as well. But when you say, what does it look like? It looks like the young man who wants to start a new business will be able to do that.
Yeah, but is it the state government funding it, or is it the federal, or is it working with the federal government to somehow get federal money into it?
I think it is federal, and it is federal. There's no question about that. However, I don't think it's possible for the state to do by themselves. But as I mentioned, there could be potential opportunities to work regionally to get it started, to look at the direction that we could go. But ultimately, it is going to be federal. You have serious looks on your face.
Well,
this is good stuff. This is things that we can do and make happen in the state. And I hope that you will see that my record in the state Senate tells you in this conversation that it is all linked together. And I am able to, as I said, put these ideas into action and to bring people to the table to really solve problems. I've done it. I want to do it. We are going in the wrong direction in this state, and we need to turn it around.
Well, thank you for coming in and
Yes,
letting us know where you stand.
thank you. You know how to contact me.
We do.